Canadian Cannabis Podcast. Dabble Cannabis Co. CEO Alannah Davis joins me today from the Cowichan Valley, Vancouver Island, and I'm over here in Manitoba. Another awesome episode. It's Sunday. All you Yellowstone lovers, this is the pre-game to that coming up. And couldn't be more excited to have Dabble Cannabis Co. on. Obviously running a unique situation down in Vancouver Island with regard to ranch style or farm gate or either or family run entity. And we've connected in the past, Alannah. I know that some of our viewers, some of our subscribers are likely familiar to the publication that you and I were able to work together on getting out. And I've been waiting patiently to connect with you here today on this episode. And with no further ado, please tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're at, and just get us into a little bit about the Dabble. I have some questions for you. I've been waiting to connect, and that's where we're at.
Sounds good. Hey, Jordan, thanks so much for having me on. It's great to see you and chat again. So my name's Alannah. I lead my family's cannabis farm and bed and breakfast location on Vancouver Island. So we have an outdoor standard cultivation license where we have just completed our second grow season and finished harvesting about a month ago. And we also have on our property like I mentioned, a bed and breakfast and camping space and a private lake for our guests to enjoy a little cabana and just have lots of good times, good sessions with us. And leading that whole shebang.
So when we first connected, Alannah, it was obvious. You had a breakthrough in the industry. Aside from us talking a little bit more, we can get into the history of Dabble, any of the setbacks in the startup, what it's been like. But ultimately, you found a way to navigate at a time where BC was being slammed with a strike as far as the LDBC goes, the delivery of fire quality product being delivered to retailers. And it was quite fascinating, because a lot of the work that I do usually behind the scenes is generally that, just paying attention to regulations, up to par industry news, and seeing what type of what's common, I guess, while each province runs different systems of provincial regulations under the umbrella of the federal regulations. And from down in Vancouver Island, you definitely jumped right outside of the box and took it to direct delivery. And if you don't mind, I know we did, it's published. There's a link in the video description for viewers to follow up that way. But if we could talk a little bit about that, our meeting initially, and what it, some of that story there, what was going on, how did Dabble Cannabis find that loop in the system, and kind of what's come about since then?
Yeah, definitely. So we had just finished processing, packaging, and labeling, and we're in the process of, with our sales partner, because we have a cultivation license, we have to bring our product to another farm to process. And because that farm doesn't have their sales amendment, which means that they'll be allowed to excise stamp it and ship it to the provincial government, the BCLDB, we have to take it to a third group, which is our sales partner, and they stamp it and put it in a master case and ship it to the government warehouse. So through the summer, we were in process of finishing that up for our very first launch. And so the BCLDB had actually received 50 cases of our product the Wednesday prior to the strike. And we'd been hearing a little bit of rumblings about it. To be honest, I hadn't heard definitively what was going to happen. But I had hoped that because I would be delivering on the Wednesday, I kind of had anticipated our product going live on the wholesale website. And then they go on strike on the following Monday. So nothing ever was live, and retailers did not have a chance to purchase our product from the wholesale website. And then they went on strike, so nothing was happening. And sort of during the same time frame, the LCRB and the BCLDB, which are kind of like the group that creates the rules, which is the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Board, and then also the BCLDB, which sort of maintain the supply chain, and they also have public stores. they were working together on a program that was supposed to benefit small farmers like ours, called direct delivery. And so this was already a program that was in motion, and I had registered Dabble because we were eligible. We produce less than 3,000 kilos per year. We're considered a small producer. I was like, yes, getting in there immediately, be able to ship direct to stores, like create relationships, not have to rely on a category manager to accept or deny my product that frankly, I feel they need some education around certain categories, maybe all of them, I don't know. But anyways, so direct delivery, I registered, and we were all waiting to hear whether or not we were like given the go ahead, because I had received as a cultivator my approval, but my sales partner had not yet received their stamp of approval. And so then they go on strike, and days later, they announced that the direct delivery program, which was supposed to be scheduled for that same Monday that they went on strike, that was when the program was supposed to be open. They announced that no, in fact, direct delivery is not happening. And so cue outcry, because now the entire supply chain and also potential from getting it from small farmers is off the table. Retailers are like, we're going to have to shut our stores. What the hell? And during all of this was the end of August. And so my plants were in flower, and I had already arranged a retailer education event at the farm for that Sunday that was upcoming. And it was not at all to do with direct delivery, although we knew that that was coming. But I just felt the opportunity was there to kind of like engage with retailers and show them our product at its best time of the year, ask questions, and then we'd have a barbecue by the lake, because that's awesome at the end of August. And so direct delivery gets taken off the table, gets taken on the table again that Friday of the weekend. And so Sean at Western Extraction, they get their approval to sell as direct delivery. And so since I already had my cultivator approval, we had been given the go ahead. And funny enough, earlier that summer, I had written on our whiteboard in the office in the facility that Dabbleberry is the #1 selling concentrate. And at the time of the kickoff of direct delivery, we were the only concentrate on the market. Wow. So the universe delivers what you manifest in very unique ways sometimes. Sure. Yeah, which I was like, okay, sweet. And yeah, so we were eligible to begin selling, and Western Extraction had the idea that they would bring the product to the retailer event, because we'd been talking about it all week, how we're going to begin executing, because we were getting so much attention all week as an approved cultivator. I was really vocal on LinkedIn and Instagram, and I had, having worked in the industry previously, a lot of my connections were supporting me and sharing it, and it just went far and wide. And so I had tons of awareness already kind of coming. And then they saw us on the approved cultivator list. We're the only concentrate available that they can even purchase. So naturally, a lot of people reached out and wanted inventory of any kind. Plus, it was a launch of a brand new SKU in a category that's very small. And I think it is also very nice quality. And I have heard really positive reviews since then. So it was just an all around, like, everyone's like, oh man, we want Dabbleberry. We want it. And so that Sunday we had the event and had everyone that was a retailer that had the opportunity to purchase and take home their cases that day, because the LP had brought them and delivered them directly to the retailer. And they happened to be on the farm that had been produced on, or at least grown on. And so inadvertently, I had kind of created that farm gate sale before farm gate was even a thing. So it was a really unique happenstance situation that required us to get creative and work as a partnership. And it really allowed us to have that like one-on-one relationship again. We were doing deals at my parents' kitchen table with retailers, and some of them had come from that legacy store time, and they said this like feels like the old days, and like community. We're just having a good time, having a barbecue and selling product. Like it was really special. And like I could not have asked for a better like timing and kickoff to give awareness to a new brand. Like, wow.
Fascinating. Totally. Like you said, the small, like even just the small world, the small community, a lot of the culture, like it definitely like emphasize the culture behind the brand itself or the industry generally. That seems to be a very unique fit with a lot of brands that way, and kind of as opposed to just kind of pushing out and then entering and taking the plunge. Right. So I did make some notes on your story here because it's very interesting. Now, Dabble Cannabis Co. Obviously, the name itself, it pops. Dabble. You've explained that when that strike hit, you had 50 cases obviously about to go into limbo. While that would be disheartening, I think, for any LP, flower products, pre-rolls, right? Now in the concentrate area, obviously in your expertise, there's a little bit more work going into that product before it makes it to the retail. So the processing side of things, just a little bit about that, like I know when we've connected a bit in the past, I've been connecting with retailers myself this week and other brands across mostly Ontario and BC, to tell you the truth. That's going to continue for a little bit. And just some of those, looking at some of what's popping out as far as that, the setback, the financial burden in the industry. It seems like this, I guess, on the surface, and I've dealt with it, whether through interview or connecting with brands, potential partnership discussions, where it can be success as in appearance or striving for success either way, like everything that we're doing in the cannabis industry is a money press, for example. So I mean, obviously that isn't the case. And for a LP, like in the processing, for example, there must have been a lot of investment gone into those products, for example. And to turn that into motivation and drive to say, hell no, right? To pick apart the regulations and find the algorithm that's going to work. That's absolutely impressive. Like where I'm sure there's others, like the disheartening effect, almost collapsing, for example, like looking at the finances tied up and getting the product to market. And then something like a strike all of a sudden coming into play, that could definitely have some very, very negative setbacks. But the process in your product, so the Dabble Berry, the name Dabble, and bringing that back to your product specifically, and with this discussion, would you share a little bit about that? Like, what's some of the magic going in behind the processing, say the Dabble Berry? I've had very, very positive feedback explaining to people over the last 2 weeks that you were going to be the next guest on the Canadian Cannabis Podcast, who have been hearing excellent things about your concentrates. So although I have not tried, it's something I definitely look forward to down the line. But the importance of you getting your product, being the only available concentrate in that market, and now staying true to the name and the brand itself, while you're getting that same positive feedback from consumers and other retailers. Would you mind to share a little bit about that? Like the Dabble, the emphasis on concentrate specifically. Are you going to just continue harnessing that as the forte, or is there other plans, for example, with other product coming into life? And then also just talking about the great setup that you have there. I'm totally interested that way too. So yeah.
Okay, so I'll give you a little bit of background. The company was originally licensed as a different name that was pretty basic when my dad first started out on the project, because a lot of people think like, oh man, how did you convince your parents to have a weed farm? And it was actually not even my idea. It was my dad. He is a lifelong passionate consumer, as am I. And so when we kind of decided that we were going to take our product to market, I was sort of taking the lead at that time, and I was like, okay, this name just doesn't hit, sorry. And so we decided as a group that we were going to rename the company, and something that we wanted to sort of be as our brand. Our farm is called High Point Guest Ranch, and so obviously High Point Cannabis, like high, like it makes so much sense, perfect fit. But unfortunately, there already was by that point a High Point LP in Ontario. So that name was out. And so we started coming up with names and came up with thousands, I swear, and couldn't agree on any until Dabble came up and kind of became really interesting because Dabble, obviously, dab is the type of product that we make right now. Doug, Alannah, Brody is my dad, myself, and my brother. And then Dabble kind of means to like try new things. And I personally like was introduced to concentrates not all that long ago and just really fell in love with dabs and the product of live rosin and just sort of everything from there. And so I really want to have our farm be like a focus on education for new consumers and existing consumers, like wanting to learn about new product formats, whether they be concentrates or not. And just to sort of like really have that like try it out kind of vibe. And so that's where the name kind of comes from. Being that we're most focused on creating dabs, it is interesting. And so that is going to remain a primary focus of ours for a few reasons. One, because it's my personal favorite to make and consume. I love hash rosin and smoke it every day. And so also I enjoy pressing rosin like so much and washing hash. It's just like it's a really fun thing to do. And I'm very blessed that that's my job. And then also from a logistical perspective, the way that our facility is created, it's an outdoor farm. And so we're leveraging the sun and seasonal growing. And so we have a 5-acre sort of parcel with about 4 acres of growing space. So while it's not a major, huge LP, it's certainly not small. And to dry all of that cannabis, you need a substantial amount of space because, or really staggered crops in still a very large amount of space. And so we built our facility in a really simple fashion, made mainly with shipping containers. So one of them is a secure storage that's a 20 by 8 shipping container that's an entirely a freezer. And then the other sort of like processing room that really is just for bagging and sort of like small activities also contains a 8 by 8 freezer in the back. And so for our very first year, because we've bootstrapped this business the whole way through, we all of our crop actually fit into those 2 containers like perfectly. And we could have only done that obviously because it's fresh frozen and not needing to be, like given like the perfect amount of like air between the plants to dry and everything like that. So logistically, that was the play, as well as the fact that we're passionate about it. And so what we are looking to do though this year, because we actually don't have our processing license, as I mentioned earlier, we take our product to a friend's farm who is an LP and they have their processing license, and we do all of our processing ourselves at their space. And so we've kind of worked out an arrangement where they get a percentage of our sales to allow us to use that like space. And then we use all of our own equipment. We bring it in and do what we got to do: wash, freeze dry, press, etc. And then we take it again, like I mentioned, to that final sales LP to get it out the door.
So a lot of collaboration either way, right? Like you mentioned, to partnership, and how like that's obviously been an important play I found too in some of my discussions on the show, as well as just reaching out. Like the collabs definitely in the cannabis community can almost make or break, for example, some of that, especially when the terminology you're applying, the bootstrapping, which is kind of like how it's been, man, just taking the plunge, getting in the industry, sorting out exactly where you fall in and where everything kind of fits. Mm-hmm. Another interesting component that you've mentioned as far as like the piqued interest in wanting to actually visit the area, promote a little bit more where I can, as far as following up and staying in touch with Dabble. I've got more publications to come as well with the Canadian industry. So there's definitely lots of room and seeing how things unfold that way. But obviously on this platform, and I know we talked about it when I first connected with you over the publication, the farm gate setup and the bed and breakfast. Now, are you looking at potential like licensing to, or have you looked at or at the Vancouver Island? How's the provincial licensing going, say for music festivals, or to have that space become a festival sponsored by the farm or the cannabis community in general, and finding those very, I guess, strategic and out of the box thinking ways to brand market a little further and emphasizing that culture. So is it something that's been part of that atmosphere? I mean, you've got the lake, all of that, the tourists. So I guess if we cap it up with some of that, how important has like the tourism industry, music culture, and having that space kind of defined as an education campground, if you say, but is any of that part of the plan down the line for Dabble becoming like a main player in that area, building on some of those collaborations? And is there something that we could look forward to with Respect My Region Canada, potentially next summer, for example, on coming around and taking it all in?
Mm-hmm. So yeah, we currently have our loft space that is rentable now. And so I'll give you the details for our winter promo as well to share with everybody. And so that's available immediately. And we do have, like I said, camping and stuff available right away. As far as licensing goes, the province has come out with some preliminary information about a production retail store, which is the farm gate, essentially. Cool. So for me to have a retail license on my farm, there is a bit of uncertainty as to the specifics of the rules on this. They're pretty vague. And so we expect to hear more information at the end of November here about that. And then also I was a little bit disheartened to see that it's $7,500 application fee to apply for this retail store, which is 13 times more expensive than if you were to try and operate a winery, brewery, or cidery on your farm.
No kidding. Yeah.
Just, that's fun. And so that is what the same price as what a cannabis retail store application fee is. So that was a bit disheartening and kind of also gave me a little bit of a pause, because my original plan was, I want to be the first I want to be the first cannabis farm gate store on Vancouver Island. But when this sort of preliminary information came out about the regs, it frustrated me so much and kind of incensed a little bit of regulatory fire in me, because just of the inequity of that. It's just so unnecessary. And so I kind of might hold off on the actual retail component of High Point and Dabble for a little while yet, because the way that I want to operate that sort of farm store experience is a little bit different than what it can be with the current structure. So I envision having a much more holistic stay and play experience where customers can come and, come for a tour and an experience. Maybe there's a cafe or some food element or some event space. And then they have the option to come into our store and have, a taster, a dab flight, whatever it may be, buy a coffee and, local art or farm fresh eggs and some jam and also some cannabis, and then, leave. But a lot of those things are not currently in place. And I realized that the sort of cost to set up and cost for that vision is not something that I can take on lightly. And so as of now, the farm is a private property, and, adults can consume cannabis on their private property, right, other than within our facility gates, of course. And so for the time being, it will, remain that our guests are allowed to consume as long as they're adults and in a private property space. But the farm gate official store won't be coming for this summer. And so we'll see sort of how the plans play out. Definitely we'll see one on the farm in the future.
Yes.
Just not as immediately as I had planned, because I kind of realized, hey, being first doesn't always mean that's best. And I have a very long-term strategic vision for the farm, and there's no need to rush. I can offer, events where consumption is a thing.
Right.
Anyways. And so I believe that that's kind of the way that it's going to be for a while.
I was just sifting through a couple of notes there to pull that up, actually, like the special event status, to see what we talked about before, because that's exactly it. Like with that headache, obviously, in the licensing applications. But again, bringing it back to that music and why asking if that was going to be the special event status as the Canadian regulations go. Obviously encouraging or enticing, let's say, is mobile dispensaries thing in the West Coast happening yet that you know of in that regulation?
You can do a delivery thing. It does have to be your own employees, though. You couldn't offer Canada Post or FedEx or Uber Eats delivery for your cannabis from your retail store. But there definitely could be some opportunity to get creative. I saw something interesting at a music festival in Manitoba, I think, where they had the click and collect right now, basically, as though they had a store on site. So I thought that was awesome. And so definitely, I think some creative delivery options for our guests and stuff will be the play. As far as events, we are on agricultural land. And so growing cannabis is obviously our primary function. And we're allowed to have a handful of events each year. And so we kind of carefully curate those. And we have held small music festivals in the past, which was very fun. And unfortunately, COVID kind of took it out because it's such a huge undertaking. And then obviously events in general were kind of off the table for a few years. And then we've gotten so busy with Dabble that we haven't kicked it off. However, we will probably be having a little mini one for my dad's 60th birthday this summer coming up. Cool. But definitely there will be some great things like that coming in the future for sure.
Awesome. Education, just to kind of close things off as we kind of get that way, as far as obviously you do an excellent job in educating anybody that you deal with, because that's what my interaction with you has been now twice, just straight learning from you. And it's absolutely, I love it. Right? It's very cool. But I know you've emphasized education in this episode a couple of times. And just with that, so when you entering the industry as an LP, putting the cash up, applying for the licenses, being approved, and then getting into the mix. But how has the education been from a trickle-down effect, for example, from Health Canada, getting into the game and looking at that? And if at the same time having to dabble the regulations yourself and emphasizing, if not a trickle-down effect, what are some of the processes and procedures that you found the most insightful and helpful as far as resources go in getting proper education regarding your product out to consumers or to the BC market and beyond? And your take on the platform Respect My Region Canada, or what I do in Canada with Flourish Ventures Limited as far as navigating regulations for brand marketing and obviously emphasizing public cannabis education.
Okay, so as far as existing learning, and when we got started, it was the school of hard knocks. There was no education happening as far as I'm concerned. I fortunately had some work experience in the legal cannabis industry. I started with Aurora in 2018 and set up their recreational supply chain, went on to do a number of roles: business process management, product development, specializing in concentrates, and then finished as a senior manager of product commercialization. So from idea to shelf, essentially, program managing the launch of the recreational products into that market, as well as the medical supply chain, kind of working collaboratively with them. So I would say that was a huge element of my education, learning the rules, and that was somewhat by design. When we kicked off the cannabis project at the farm, there was some other people involved, and I wasn't originally as involved, and sort of came in to finish off the application and get the project across the finish line, and then again to launch a brand. So learned a lot through my experience at Aurora, and kind of strategically learning the front end and the back end as much as I possibly could, asking as many questions as I possibly could, just taking advantage, knowing that one day this was the dream. And here I am, which is fucking awesome. And so then also like creating those relationships of friends like Annalise, who introduced us. She's a phenomenal resource, and as are so many people that I've met in this industry and community. I would say that like friends and like community members have been my biggest source of like learning that, and also just reading the rules. Literally, so many people don't themselves, and it sucks. They're boring and they're very dryly written and a challenge to get through. But I've had people tell me that they're going to start an LP, and I said, have you read the regs? And they said no. And I was like, well, good luck, because that's dumb in my opinion. Right. Learn what you're going to get yourself into, and if you're actually prepared for that before you start a project that costs lots of money. And so the education element, I have provided that feedback, and I'm sure that many other people have, as far as Health Canada needing to provide it to license holders as to like what they want to see. And I have seen like a smidge more of like Health Canada to LP education and prospective LP. So that's good to see. I've taken advantage of some of their seminars. I'm not at the point where I'm at. It hasn't necessarily benefited me, but I'm glad to see that it exists now. And so it just goes to show that we were kind of like earlier than they were ready to deliver that type of program, whatever. As far as the public education situation, I think is definitely needs to change, because cannabis stores previously to legalization were a huge source of education. And now bud tenders are not allowed to talk about anything, potential benefits or deterrents, or like they can't tell anyone anything. And then doctors also are pretty uneducated about cannabis, and they tell people to go to retail stores, and they can't do that. Right. And then, the police pull out candy that's from a legacy dispensary or website, and then they're like, I don't even know if this is legal or not. And we're like, okay. So education is a huge element that is lacking. And then finally, our farm in general, I want to focus on education, because I've had so many people support my educational journey from a regulation perspective, but also a product consumption perspective, and learning how to make hash. I've had people who are my competition with SKUs in the market under other brands, and they're still taking the time out of their lives to teach me how to make this product and how to improve my techniques and what to do, and even lending me equipment, and just the community and stuff in that. I want to kind of continue to give back, and I have future goals about teaching people how the Canadian regulations work, from seed to sale, soil to oil, on the farm, with a physical on-hands component, because there isn't even any education programs about cannabis on the island that I found. None of the universities have that. I was like, can I offer an internship program to your cannabis program? They don't even have a cannabis program. So it's my dream to even create that. And so you can learn about not only like the propagation and harvest and processing, but also the rules and regulations and how to manage and create SOPs and quality management programs and, the provincial supply chains and all of the differences there and the marketing and sales. And eventually when we have that farm gate store, even the like retail regulations and consumption, like forever, all these ideas.
I appreciate your answers, and you know, we in our description we talk. So like, even though it wasn't specified specifically, you definitely shared a lot as far as the standard operating procedures and the quality assurance measures that you are applying and seeing your product come to the Canadian market on fire. And I mean, it's pretty damn neat that way. In terms of the regulations and the education, it's a commonality as far as each province to province that I connect with the retailers on that term. In Manitoba, it doesn't seem, as a bud tender, not so muzzled. I mean, at the same time, I do have dealt with customers that are a little more familiar with some of my other affiliations. So whether it's just lending some trust into me pointing them in the right direction or not, as opposed to like coming to me to say, educate me. But definitely agree with you on that. And because I'm asking and why particularly is just at the time of the Cannabis Act review. And hopefully that, because it's outlined, if you've looked at, I'm always looking at it. So it jumps out in a number of areas where the emphasis is public cannabis education. And I mean, some of the information I found as far as to hear from what your perspective as an LP and know what I'm looking at, obviously identifying a lack of public education as far as the cannabis industry, not cannabis regulations. What are the different sectors in the industry, the requirements for getting in? It's like still a club of sorts. If you're not in it, then it's kind of at bay, but breaking those stigmas and getting that information out. I look at mainstream. How soon can it be before attending as a guest speaker or a facilitator in post-secondary institutions, for example, like you've said, reaching out and seeing if they have a cannabis program in play yet, or even at the horticultural programs or whatnot. But that's the build up here. What I'm looking at for exactly with that is that next break and bringing that regulation and education out. Thankfully, though, through mutual acquaintances that we do have, like Annie Raga, starting to navigate the loopholes in that and finding the appropriate licensing and the appropriate avenues and partnerships into breaking that ice a little further, and definitely getting out and helping educate a lot more people this way. So it requires definitely collaborations. I'm going to keep saying that, because a lot of the work that I'm going to be doing, for example, will require a site facility, like a licensed site. So whether it's a facility, whether it's a retail, those are partnerships that are going to be coming to play is either which way, and then designating those areas as educational area, like educational stations or for education sessions. I like saying sessions. It's fitting.
Yeah.
But yeah, obviously a common concern for sure. And from store owners, very much so that way. So here again, what we're breaking the ice, I've got two retail, because you mentioned it, you're doing it out there. So I'm fascinated to hear that. And I want to follow up after our episode a little further on the education stuff, particularly because I've booked two retail sites here in Manitoba for upcoming education sessions. So again, it's specified to the store location. I mean, the kind of more consumer based and providing information that way about some of the regulations involved. Store owners and bud tenders obviously there on site to talk about their experiences and journey in the industry that way too. But more importantly, to help consumers who are literally maybe just shopping because it's a cannabis shop, to kind of break down some of that cannabinoids, flavonoids, terpenoids, right? And break it right down to some of the science behind the plant. You know, I'm not a scientist, but breaking it down a little further and maybe helping some of the customers leave those areas knowing like as simple as starting to journal, right? Like you mentioned, it's important for LPs to look at the regulations, and that's kind of the platform, the game that I push heavy right now is that exactly as consumers. It doesn't hurt to jot down how these products affect you, you know what I mean? And kind of look at it, the magic behind the science of what you're actually consuming. So very cool.
The times they are changing. My grandmother actually just reached out to me and has gone into a cannabis store and gotten product to consume now, which
Awesome.
is crazy because she has not been a fan my dad's whole life. So that's some change.
Yeah. I'm thinking about recruiting a podcast reviewer, cannabis product reviewer in the West Coast. Do you think your grandma might be just the right fit?
I don't think so.
No, I get you there. Yes. So I guess no. That's funny. That would be kind of cool though. I'm thinking like visualizing that.
I do have someone for you though. We can connect.
Definitely, we're going to connect on that. So again, just closing it off. Obviously, a number of cool things happening in behind the scenes for Respect My Region, the build up for RMR Canada. Going to break it through a little further and start to make the Canadian Cannabis Podcast a bit more of a regular thing through into 2023. We are coming close to the end of this season. I've got another player coming out from the West Coast to help us close things off in a few weeks that way. And then really tying it all together between Canada and some of the people I've connected. A lot are acquainted through the industry, other upper level brand management that way kind of deal. But either which way, everyone is definitely intermingled and worth following up with for their fantastic stories. And that's kind of the approach I'd like to go, because I don't want much of everything from this entire season to go for naught. And reconnecting and staying connecting with most of the guests is going to be a major move as far as that way goes. And looking at, again, the Cannabis Act, and hopefully with some insight or leveling out as far as the brand marketing goes. And then, of course, being in the appropriate educational position to jump on with a pile of brands and help break those barriers even further. So, Alannah, I appreciate your time. I believe we did kind of hit on everything that we planned to. We do have a little bit of time. If there's anything you want to plug out specifically, any product drops coming up, pointing your consumers and followers into the right direction. Otherwise, it's been a fantastic discussion. Your brand is definitely making waves again, and that's not a fabrication, man. Like I'm hearing it, and I like to hear it. I feel dumb when I'm being asked, have you tried it? And I'm like, no, I haven't. I haven't tried it yet. So that's something I hope that happens in a short time that way too. So if there's province plans coming up interprovincially where people might find your product now and soon enough, please just share some of that information before we close off.
Yeah. So right now we're in BC and then sold medically through Mendo Medical nationally. We have just the Dabbleberry out for now. And then I'm waiting on my final test results of our second drop of live rosin called Strawberry Jam, which is named after my Nana's strawberry jam recipe because it is so fragrant and delicious. The flavor is unbelievable. I've been told it smells like strawberries with a hint of armpit in a good way. All the stoners out there will definitely know what that means.
Yeah.
So it was a grower that said that, and I was like, nice. So that strawberry jam is going to be launching into BC, hopefully via direct delivery exclusively if I can get enough volume going through that. Now, as far as provincial expansion goes, the sales partner that we're working with, Western Extraction, is working on getting into Ontario. However, they declined our live rosin SKU, as did BC, even though, as you say, it's getting good reviews, but these provincial boards just gatekeeping away. So, that's a challenge. So we're going to try again to get into Ontario. And there's other sort of expansion opportunities into maybe Saskatchewan or maybe Manitoba. Just kind of figuring out what the best play is as far as like freight and how do we work with distributors. Does that make sense? I mean, it's tough because I don't really want to pay yet another cut to something just because there's not much there. Okay. So it's just kind of determining what the best path is with the supply chain that we've got. And so we're going to be mainly focusing on BC and just getting like a really good foothold while we kind of figure out that next step. But again, Mendo Medical for those nationally, it is available. Or hit me up, I'll mail you some.
Awesome. I've got Mendo Medical pulled up on a window here just from some other work I was doing. And I actually believe that, if I'm not mistaken, there was a Brandon location that popped up right away with the Mendo Medical for delivery. So I might be trying your products sooner than next summer. That would be very cool.
Yeah. So you'll need a prescription for the medical program, but those are easily
very much.
obtainable.
I'm medically certified. Yeah, it's all good that way. Not through Mendo, but I think I've clarified that already, because that's hence the reason of having them up, being a medical provider. Yeah. So my
exactly right on.
But wow, absolutely very cool.
Mm-hmm.
Very awesome. We went almost an hour. It's beautiful.
Amazing.
Yeah, I appreciate your time again. Like, I can't really emphasize too much more. It's just, again, it's been an awesome experience running the Canadian Cannabis Podcast. Viewers, subscribers, we are at the end of this episode, and we've got about 4 more to go, bringing out the 2022 North American Weed Tour Canadian Cannabis Podcast. Special thanks to today's guest, Alannah Davis, CEO of Dabble Cannabis Co, coming out of Vancouver Island. I'm your host, Jordan Fleury, over here in Manitoba, in the armpit of Canada, and breaking waves with the Canadian cannabis regulations, and a lot of awesome news and information coming to you guys over the next 3 to 5 weeks. And with that, Alannah, keep lit and grow some.
Thank you.